we are back here on the Falls Count Everywhere podcast here on the Lime Time Podcast Network. Of course, I am Rough Cut Rick Ruby here. GQ is on the other side here, and at this time, what we're going to do here is we've actually got our featured guest of the evening. This guest, of course, has been involved with professional wrestling for about 27 years. He's wrestled across multiple regions in the U.S. that include the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast, winning multiple heavyweight championships in each territory. And, of course, having other interests outside of wrestling as well that we're going to talk about, including in the world of broadcasting and, of course, powerlifting. And he's been Dynamite, and he's also been the Sheik. But we welcome Derek Stone to the Falls Count Everywhere podcast. Derek, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on tonight, man. I really appreciate it. It's good to talk to you.
Oh, man, it's great. It's great to kind of we're going to be talking about a lot of things here, and, of course, also maybe some reminiscing of maybe, the 90s were such a great time, especially coming up as a wrestler. So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I miss it for sure.
Yeah, man. So we're going to get down to the nitty gritty here. Obviously, let's see, you started around 1993, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess first I want to, when did you develop your love for the sport and the business of professional wrestling?
Oh, it's just one of those things. I think my story is probably pretty similar to a lot of people in that, like, it was just something I always wanted to do. Like when I was a little kid, and I grew up here in Denver. The AWA was really big in Denver. And that was kind of like my first real exposure to professional wrestling, is that they had a Sunday morning television studio show, and they would kind of recap the stuff from the events like the night before and stuff like that. So I just sort of fell in love with wrestling after, I would say probably, when I was 4 or 5 years old, something like that. And of course I had 2 older brothers, and they liked wrestling as well. One of them really liked wrestling, and the other one just kind of liked beating me up, I guess. So, yeah, so that it just very early on, and then it was just something that I thought, I'm going to give this a shot, and I've been lucky enough in my life to be able to do 2 things that I really wanted to do with my life, which is wrestling and radio, which I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit later about that too. So yeah, just sort of very early on of something that I wanted to do, and I've just been lucky to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like guys like us that develop a passion for it, and then for me, I just happened to stumble across, like an independent show. Wasn't really looking for it, but always hoped for it, and then it just happened. But yeah, I mean, things like that happen, and as far as like great, getting our great, there's getting our start is, always something that we remember. So, whenever you're watching wrestling before you got in the business, was there anybody that you watched that inspired you? Who did you like wrestling, or
Yeah, my first, I don't have a ton, I'm like a lot of folks, but I think my first couple favorites, again, mentioning like I grew up watching the AWA. I was a big Sergeant Slaughter fan when I was a little kid. He was the kind of the big baby face, and this is pre Hulk Hogan days. I'm an old guy, so I was a big fan of Sergeant Slaughter. I was a big fan of so some people might not even remember a guy named Jerry Blackwell, the Crusher Jerry Blackwell.
Oh yes,
I just absolutely loved that guy. Had the best punches in the world. They were just so believable, and they looked so good. And he's just this. There was something about me as a little kid. I could relate to some big fat guy doing a splash on somebody. You know what I mean? Like I could just I just, oh my gosh, that's the most devastating thing in the world. So I was a big fan of him. And then of course, as I got a little bit older, and then I got exposed to like the NWA, didn't really do that until they came on cable, because they really didn't tour very much in Denver or anything. So, then I started liking the, Ric Flair, Barry Windham, all the staples of the NWA, Harley Race, of course. I was it was funny because I spending so much time with Harley, but I ended up watching his WWF stuff first, because that's just the time frame of what I got exposed to. And then later on was able to go and watch some of his older stuff in retrospect, So those are some of my favorites. So I really kind of became, by the time I was a teenager, though, I soaked up every wrestling, any wrestling that I could see anywhere, I was watching it, and I was trying to get it on TV and, any replays, even if it was on at like, 2 a.m, I was videotaping it, or, I was recording it on the VCR so I could watch it after school all the time.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry, you said a couple trigger words here and relating to age, and I'm sorry that I have to do this.
Okay.
I didn't even know it today until I saw my Facebook feed, but it's actually your birthday today, guys.
It is, yeah.
I told him it already, Ruby. I know who your guests are, okay? You should know that.
Yeah, well, I couldn't, I saw that, but I asked you about, about you coming onto the show, and you could, and one thing I'll say is you could have just said, you know what, it's my birthday, I want to go out, I want to do something, and I would have been totally fine with it because, when we get up there, we either choose to just say, it's another day, or, I want to go out and party, or, just go out and have socialize with friends. So,
I didn't do too much for my birthday today. I had a steak for dinner, which was great. And other than that, though, it's a pleasure talking to you guys. So don't worry about that stuff.
Yeah.
Should go to a bar and knock somebody out. I mean, that's just my opinion there, but that's,
Oh, my
well, I haven't knocked anybody out in a bar in a really, really long time.
I know a place. I'm just saying,
or maybe possible future bar owners. We might even get to that. So actually, I'm actually reading into the chat room here. So Sean Schulze says Derek Stone has always been a class act, in and out of the locker room, helpful, thoughtful, and always put a lot into his craft. He says, "Happy birthday, buddy! Glad life is treating you well, and you deserve it." So,
thank you. That's very nice. That's very kind, Sean. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, getting into still with the beginning of our experiences. So, who actually trained Derek Stone?
So I started with Charlie Fulton in Marion, Ohio, and Charlie is one of the best trainers probably ever. You talk to anybody that knows the wrestling business is like that. Oh, that's a guy who knows his stuff for sure. So I started there in Marion, Ohio in 1993. Charlie had famously kind of worked for a lot of. At the time, there weren't a lot of really famous wrestling schools, and it was kind of a hard time to get involved in the wrestling business. But he had worked for the Monster Factory back when Larry Sharp owned it. Him and Larry Sharp were good friends, and so he was kind of the main guy training a lot of those guys. So I have a pretty good lineage of guys that were trained by the same man as me. Guys like The Godfather, Raven, Ray Odyssey, lots of really talented guys that have gone on to do a lot more than I have. So I always feel good about, and there's always that connection when I talk to guys about where I started. They say, "Oh, okay, well then we don't have to worry about you. We know that you're a solid guy." So that was always something I took pride in.
Yeah, and always good to get your travels on and finding the best school that you possibly can, something that's reputable, and then obviously making a name for yourself. Will write for itself whenever you get out and get your exposure. Speaking of exposure, though, I just now thought about this. You had some side work with then WWF back in most of the 90s?
Yeah, most of the 90s I did quite a bit. In fact, my very first match was with the WWF. That was kind of Charlie's thing, is that he was sort of, this was back in the day when his only business was producing good wrestlers. He didn't have a promotion. He didn't run shows. He didn't have anything to do with that side of the business. It was just you come in, you learn how to wrestle, and then he was going to kind of teach you the business, and so you'd be your own independent contractor. So, yeah, my first, I'd say probably my first 20 out of 40 matches or, something like that were WWF television matches, So I was pretty busy there for a while.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I don't know who could really say that, with putting your first match out there on WWF television, obviously to kind of give somebody else a little bit of a push for the week, but otherwise it's still exposure, and that's awesome to have. Yeah. So, I mean, my first singles match ever was against Cowboy Bob Orton on the local TV taping, and of course botching taking the pile driver. But that's a memory I like to kind of suppress. But that's just me.
Made you a couple inches shorter, right?
yeah, yeah. I was 6 foot. Now I'm like 5'11". So I'm still trying
Yeah.
to stretch it out. And boy,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. There's nothing like the Ace that he'll work you old school, and that's
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know what's funny about it? Just to bring him up, I mean, he's one of my favorite guys, and I was lucky enough to travel around just a little bit with him on some shows. But I remember one thing about him that really stuck it out. And I probably saw him in St. Louis somewhere. First time I ever met him live, and just noticing how hard he hit the ropes. And I was like, oh my gosh, and this is obviously, he's well past his prime by the time I met him. Still in fantastic shape, still a great wrestler, but like I was just shocked at, he hit those ropes so hard that this independent ring and this gym that we were at was moving across the floor. He was hitting it so hard, and it was just awesome. I was like, oh, that's okay. So that's how that when people say step it up, that's what they mean. Okay, I get it now. It was.
wow. Yeah. Yeah. Bob always told you. In fact, he's still trying to teach what he can, but right now, of course, with the whole COVID mess, he gets in when he can. With a school around here, around the St. Louis metro area, with the Ace Wrestling Academy that's over in East Carondelet, Illinois, and hopefully that'll get back up and running here again too, because Bob's really got some great knowledge to still pass on to this day.
Well, I hope so. There aren't too many people better as far as learning how to wrestle and then business itself. And that whole family is talented. Obviously Bob Orton Jr., Bob Orton Sr., Barry O, of course, Randy Orton. And I believe Randy's younger brother is a very talented stand-up comedian. I mean, like the whole family is just, they're just top notch at what they do,
Yeah, Nathan's been doing stand-up for quite a while, and I hear his shows are really great on it. So
I hear the same thing. I know a couple of friends that are local and regional stand-up comics, and they're like, man, this guy, you're going to be seeing a lot of them. So I hope that's true. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ortons are very, very talented, not just in wrestling. So, yeah, hopefully, we get they get a chance to get out and start doing some entertainment. We're thriving, needing entertainment, because I'll tell you what, it sure beats what we're trying to experience in 2020. That was about flushed down the toilet about a month ago.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to better times. If with your ring style, if you had to compare like any wrestler or wrestlers, whose style do you think you would mimic or mirror inside the ring?
Oh, geez, it's definitely changed. I think when I started, I was a young kid and just a young baby face, and I kind of worked like that. So I really, I'm modeled after guys like Ricky Steamboat. And I'm not going to compare myself to Ricky Steamboat, but I'm saying that's the guy that I tried to emulate, the kinds of things and the way that he moved and the way that he worked. Him for sure. Also, I would say Bret Hart a little bit. Of course, I got the comparison with the hair, so many times, but I think he was another one, the guy like Brad Armstrong. Then as I got a little older and I got a little bigger and a little stronger, I think that it sort of just, it morphed. And of course, being around Harley, I took a lot from him. I took a lot from Skandar Akbar about just being more vicious. And now I would say, I really don't know. I brawl a lot more than I used to. I don't take a lot of bumps. I don't move nearly as well as I used to, but 5 ruptured discs and 2 shoulders that need replaced, arthritis in your hips, that'll do it to you. That'll slow you down a little bit. So, these days I just like to get in there and fight,
Oh yeah. I'll tell you what. It's we try and do what we can, especially with guys that are definitely in mid-40s and higher, and we try to do what we can to at least as far as mount offense and definitely make an impact when we're trying with the moves that we're trying to execute. By the way, the King of Chaos, Ricky Cruz, says hi.
Well, hello to him. What a great guy that guy is. He really talented guy. It's unfortunate that I haven't been able to wrestle with him nearly as much as I would have liked to. I think we've only had one match, and it was a tag match, and I was barely in the ring with him. So Ricky Cruz is a very talented guy, man. I really think that people in St. Louis are lucky to get to see that guy.
Yeah, definitely. And I was in the ring with him. I think maybe about at the beginning of the year, and definitely a great talented guy, and definitely made me look like $1,000,000. Couldn't do it myself. So yeah, definitely a great.
And he did 900,000 worth of making you look good there. So
yeah. And unfortunately, that was just for that one night, and then now I go back to being nothing.
Are you saying, GQ? Are you saying that's not an easy task to make Rick Ruby look good?
Well, if you got a paper bag, you definitely make him look good that way. I mean, but yeah, I mean,
yeah. Come on.
It's all right.
That's not a fair statement.
Well, I mean, he's just jealous because everybody else uses his face for faceinthehole.com for something funny, so it's all right. There you go, buddy. How you like that? Wow. So getting on into, man, there's just so much here because, I mean, I know that when you came out from the 90s, and because I'll have to kind of touch base with the hometown area, at least where I'm at, because obviously you had, how did you get into the fold with the MVWA? Because they they were starting up around 97, and you obviously were there. I was there at the beginning, and then faded off. But as far as, I mean, how did you enjoy your time in MVWA?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's funny because there was lots of, and I'm sure that it's probably still the same. There's lots of drama in the St. Louis area, as far as wrestling was concerned. But I was lucky enough to be able to work for a couple of different promoters there that always treated me really well. And I'm talking about the MVWA and also MRW at the time. And I worked for Frank Reed as well. And every one of those guys treated me very, very well, and I enjoyed my time there. The MVWA stuff was a ton of fun. Something about Steve Murphy, and we're still friends to this day, even though, I slapped him around, I think, a couple times. It was a lot. Steve was a guy who was really put his heart and soul into everything. And I really respected that about, he knew that he had some limitations, but I never questioned the fact that the guy was really giving it his all. You know what I mean? He really thought about what he was doing, and he was doing the best, I think, with the cards he was dealt. I mean, and that means that sometimes, just like any other independent wrestling promotion, sometimes guys wouldn't show up, and sometimes guys would, get butthurt about something, and then they would never want to work for him again. Or then sometimes guys were upset because two guys from, Kansas City were getting a little bit of a push, and they thought maybe local guys should be doing. It's just always lots of stuff to deal with, and I thought Steve did a great job. And to be honest, I had a lot of fun in the MVWA. I really did. I thought that all the stuff there was really fun. I enjoyed the old building that we were in, and for the life of me, the name of the place escapes me.
Occasions.
Yes, Occasions. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I loved those shows. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was one of those things that was, I wasn't going to make a ton of money there, and there weren't gigantic crowds, but the crowds were always really fun, and Steve did a nice job of building things up, and then of course later he got some TV, and I really had a good time there. I really did have a lot of fun, and I still look at all that time and a lot of the guys that I worked with there very fondly.
Yeah. So I mean, the MVWA was, definitely, one of the obviously one of the competitive promotions in the area at that time. There's only like a few, but now, now it kind of like it spreads with wildfire now with anybody who wants, if anybody doesn't get their way and they got money, then they'll just run their own promotion. But that's usually how it works. But slapping Steve Murphy around a couple times, I think it's putting it mildly. But we've got I think don't we?
He knocked him clear the heck out, is what he did.
Oh yeah, let's.
And I will tell the story that as
Tell it.
caring as all the boys were with that, Steve is laying in his room, knocked out with a concussion and everything, while everybody else is replaying that spot over and over and over and over again, watching him go pow, pow, pow. It could be a GIF right now. Everybody will use it. So
Right. Well, may not have the GIF, but we actually got the still shot of you actually making that connection in that show on Mr. Murphy
that's
on
a
our
beautiful.
feed right now.
That's a beautiful picture. Just saying.
And it's hanging up in his bar, right?
Last time I was there, yes, it was.
I was going to say there was a copy of it I know that was floating around there. So, you know,
Signed and everything. Derek Stone signed it. Sorry. 2 Murphys on 21. Sorry about that.
thank goodness Steve was a forgiving gentleman. Yeah, I remember that fondly. You know, Steve Murphy. Before he gave up wrestling, I saw him do one of the most horrific things I've ever seen in all my years of wrestling. Is that he was trying to do a moonsault and he came down
Oh, the
flat on
moon
the
spike.
top of his head. The spike, yeah, it was. Oh my! I had it on tape for a long time because I used to tape all those shows and. Oh, it was brutal. How he did not break his neck or die from that, I will never know. It was absolutely brutal.
I would think we would probably have Frank Reed to thank for that because he gave him the gimmick of the chiropractor. He might have put everything back in place. So
Maybe so. Maybe he got immediate
I think
attention.
that was,
right
I think
away,
that was
right?
an actual Bill Shields, too, I think, on that. It was either Bill Shields or Matt Taylor. I forgot which one it was, but yeah, I've seen the video at least once or twice, and that was horrific. And he probably could have been paralyzed with that, but he walked away fine.
For real, he wasn't hurt at all, and that was amazing to me because I can still see it. That's one of those things that I'll still see in my 80s. You know, I'll be lying there on my deathbed, and I'll be able to imagine that and remember it just like it was yesterday. Unbelievable, you know.
oh man, yeah, I didn't realize that Murphy even tried to do something. I'm sorry, but you won't catch a guy like me trying to moonsault even when I was back in a lighter frame. But
You know, it's funny. I think that I have seen him actually do one. So when he went to go do it, I didn't think it was going to be as horrific as it was. You know.
oh. Right. Well, things happen, and I bet you he didn't try that again. Probably didn't try a lot of other things, but at least he tried though. I can't say that I did. So, but we're going to come back to some of the wrestling here, and in just a moment here, we're going to segue a little bit here to another one of your careers, which is in the field
Okay.
of, which of course you mentioned, and with the field of broadcasting. Now you did a morning show for a radio station. It was Rapid City, South Dakota, right?
So that was my last full time gig in radio was a news talk morning show at KOTA, one of the big stations there in Rapid City, and I absolutely loved it. Probably the best actual job that I've ever had. I really enjoyed it, and I had a great boss there, and I really loved Rapid City. And I was at that job before I moved back to Kansas City back in 2016. So yeah, I loved it. Radio, like I said, radio was one of those things I always wanted to get into. When I started seeing my my wrestling career, sort of, I wasn't traveling as much, and I wasn't the way I was paying my bills. I said, might be a good time. I was going through some personal stuff at the time, and I thought maybe it's a good time to go to broadcasting school. I was lucky enough to get a job at a huge radio station in Denver as an intern, and then a morning show producer. Then I got my own radio gig in Wyoming, and then that kind of just sort of spiraled into eventually ended up in Rapid City, and I was there for probably a good 7 or 8 years on the air for a couple of different broadcasting groups there.
Oh yeah, and wow. So obviously you went up into like the Northwest. I guess outside of South Dakota. So now, as far as when your wrestling career was seemingly to kind of like deplete a little bit, and trying, like you said, trying to pay your bills. Like, how did you stumble into the field? Like, did you have like a college degree, or did you have like some type of formal training before you got into into the radio business?
Yeah. So before I even started wrestling, the only thing that I did well in college were broadcasting classes. That was the only thing I was interested in. The only thing I cared about. So I left college. That's when I started my wrestling career. But then when the wrestling career was kind of slowing down a little bit, I thought, I'm going to go to this broadcasting school. And I went to a broadcasting school that you were shotgunned into it basically. I went to school for 4 hours a day every day for 10 months, and half of the curriculum was television, the other half was radio. And at the same time, like within a month or two, when I really want to do something, I put my whole heart into it. And luckily it's really worked out well for me. So I was able to get an internship at CBS Broadcasting here in Denver, which then turned into Wilkes, which now is like, I don't even know what the name of the company is now, but I worked for some big stations under some big morning shows. So it's I got lucky in the fact that just like with my wrestling career, my very first match was with the WWF. My very first sort of exposure to radio was in a top 10 market in the country, top 15 actually. So it was like I kind of knew the pressure right away of how to produce and how to really get involved in it. But yeah, I went to a training school for 10 months where I was just basically lived and breathed radio and television and just kind of learning everything that I could technically, and then learning how to, put together a show and all those things. And of course I was lucky enough to work with some folks that were very talented and helped me, kind of develop my own style. And then I got my own gig and kind of went from there. So yeah, spent a lot. I always tell people that like my broadcasting school experience was what I needed to do to learn how to do my job, if that makes any sense,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said,
can you teach Ruby? Please teach him some stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just spent all that time, when I was trying to learn, I just tried to learn everything that I could technically. And then as far as like news talk, I really got lucky. Like radio, tons of stations get sold all the time. And I was doing pretty well on one of the stations there in Rapid City, but they sold to a different broadcasting group and they decided to eliminate my station. So I went from a station that had like absolutely no ratings to I was, number 12, which is still awful, but from not even being on the radar to being number 12 was a huge accomplishment. So I was able to get attention from one of the competing companies in the area, and they hired me to do news talk because they'd heard that, and I got a huge recommendation from my other boss, my former boss, who didn't want me to not be didn't want me to not have a job. And so I went in and got into news talk, and I really loved it. I'd love to get back to doing that again. Oh
yeah, I mean it's kind of a tough field. I mean at least in this day, but I mean with you coming in and getting into like a major market, I mean yeah, you could say well it's only the top 15, but that's across the entire nation though. So
yeah,
I mean that's still something reputable and something for you to build on. And to have all the luck and success that you had there, I mean, obviously, and walking right into that again, and you couldn't ask for anything better in that situation. But as far as with news today, I mean, it's a lot of these networks. I'll tell you, it's kind of hard to see who's actually proving their articles right, or they're trying to report the truth, and it's, I really hope that there's people out there that are just reporting the truth and actually doing research with what they're trying to do, what their job is journalism, and I see a lot of people who went to journalism school are not really exercising all their tools and what they need to do with that. But I mean that's just me because it's definitely a tough market out there because there's a lot of I guess you got to kind of have to watch out for propaganda is what I'm trying to say. And hopefully,
absolutely. Yeah. It's a very difficult thing to kind of say, well, am I being as unbiased here, or do I have an agenda going into this story? And most of the time, if you can say, no, I'm not. And I was lucky enough in Rapid actually that, I really tried to I mean, we ran national news all day long when I wasn't on the air. I was on the air for 5 hours. So I really tried to hit local stuff. And it was much easier for me to get, to call up the mayor and have the mayor come on my show and get it right from his mouth, and then that way it wasn't me putting an agenda. It was me asking a question and he answered it, so, but yeah, definitely that's something you got to worry about, but I wish that was really funny. On my job there at KOTA, is that one of the funniest things that happened to me is that within a 5-minute period, I got a phone call from somebody calling me a right-wing fascist, and that I should, that I can't believe that I'm a right-wing fascist and I shouldn't be on the air. The very next phone call, the one right after that, was a phone call saying that I was a liberal communist tree hugger and that I shouldn't be allowed to be on the air. So within 5 minutes, I was both a fascist and a communist and a liberal and and an ultra conservative in just trying to tell the truth of a story, So I thought, and I told that to my boss, and he said, "Well, it looks like you're doing something right then," So
yeah, you're getting a reaction. Wow.
Right.
He was over and he was a heel at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Oh, well, yeah. So dealing with skill in that field, and now we go to skill in another field with another competitive sport that you've been in, which was powerlifting. So we're gonna show some clips of that here on our feed here in just a moment. But how long were you involved in powerlifting?
Well, I guess technically I'm still involved. I'm still just looking for a contest. I've been doing some powerlifting contests, some strongman contests, and some Highlands game contests. Which was the Scottish games, basically. It was just one of those things that I was looking for a competitive outlet, and I was looking for something that was fun to do. I had some friends who were kind of got me involved in the sport, and now to say that I'm involved in powerlifting, like, look, I am nowhere near a top tier guy or an elite guy. I have a horrible bench, but my squat and my deadlift are pretty good. My deadlift, considering that I have 5 ruptured discs in my back, is still pretty solid, So that's where that's where I do well in those competitions. I usually, won't do great as far as the 3 lift total, but my deadlift will always be, 1 or 2 as far as the top deadlifts in the meet, especially for my age, but it's just, it was one of those things that I always kind of lifted heavy, and I was always in good shape as far as that goes. And I trained more like an athlete than I did like a bodybuilder, as far as wrestling goes. So it was not particularly, I just kind of tried to learn some technique and try to get a little bit better. And I just have a really good time. I had a couple of contests that I was scheduled to do. And of course, all of the pandemic stuff came up, and so those are obviously canceled. But I would really like to be able to do some of those again, and hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So the strongman competition. Now, obviously, there are many events in the strongman. So, do you have like an event in the strongman that stands out of your favorite as your favorite, or something that's your strength?
Yeah, I would say anything that is similar to a deadlift. So anything picking something up, or like a farmer's carry where I'm carrying something, I do pretty well with that. Of course, I both my shoulders need to be replaced. So anything overhead, like any kind of overhead pressing, is just garbage for me now. So I try to avoid those if I can. But any kind of like a functional movement where I'm carrying something or I'm picking something up, I usually do pretty well in those things. But that's the beauty about strongman, is that you'll go to a competition and the events aren't always the same. There'll be some sort of element of each one of those things, but there might be a keg toss in one of them, and those are always really fun. And then there might be a Conan's wheel where you're pushing the big wheel around, and it gets heavier and heavier as you push it, those kinds of things. The Atlas stones, of course, those big stones that you put up on pillars.
Right.
So that's the beauty of being involved in strongman comps, because, you might have a couple events that you are just great at. And then, typically everybody has some kind of weakness, and that's where it gets fun, because I just have to not be horrible at the thing that I'm not very good at, and I might win this. It's really fun.
Yeah, and I put up a picture here of you doing I guess what I would call a truck pull, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, with you pulling that rope, and I'll tell you what, boy, that's I don't care what I mean, small truck, medium sized truck, or big truck, whatever. I mean, it's still it takes something physical to to do something like that. I mean, uh, I,
I think I know the picture that you're talking about.
yeah,
Funny story about that particular event is I was really hyped up, and I was like maybe the first or second one of those that I've ever done, and I was really hyped up. They had to move the truck back. There was somebody ahead of me. They had to move the truck back, put it in reverse. Well, the guy that was, quote, driving the truck or just steering it, he didn't take it out of park. So for about 10 seconds, I'm pulling my ass off trying to, and obviously it's not going anywhere. And I'm thinking, why in the hell is this so hard? This shouldn't be this hard. And then he honks the horn. And he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm supposed to be in neutral, right?" So everybody had a big laugh at it. It was pretty funny, and so I said, "Okay, well, look, take about 2-3 minutes rest here, and then we'll start again." So I made sure that it was in, and I did considerably better with it not in park after that.
well, I mean, obviously, I mean, going against the gear, I guess.
Yeah.
Chuck's not.
Yeah, that was rough. I thought, man, am I just spent? Am I so weak that I can't even budge this thing? Yeah.
Oh my God, where was that competition at? If you can remember.
That one was in Parker, Colorado, actually, which is a suburb of Denver, kind of a little further south. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow, man, I can't believe it. I mean, why would you forget to take it out of park?
Nervous, it was kind of lots of things running around. There were lots of people going. There were 2 lanes, so I was in one lane. Somebody else was in another one with another truck, although they were basically the same truck. And yeah, he just forgot, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, after the fact, I'm sure you had a laugh at it, but
Yeah.
nothing like getting frustrated and not moving anything. So, when you training for strongman competitions or even for deadlifts, I mean, how many hours and how many times a day or like times a week do you have to be in the gym as far as like with weight training and I mean, as far as like with the workout regimen?
When I was training pretty competitively with that stuff and training as hard as I could, I was at least doing something 5 days a week, and maybe 3 of those were going to be pretty hard, and then 2 of them were going to be more technique based. And of course, I wouldn't do the same thing, but maybe like one day would be, an event day where I just practiced doing the event, and I wouldn't do it very heavy. But if say the competition had Atlas stones that were 250 pounds, that's where you started, and then you work your way up to wherever you could. I would start with, and just work on my technique with like 120-pound ball, and then 150, and then 170, just to get the form. Because honestly, there are some guys that I saw at some of these competitions that were so strong and such good athletes, but they'd never done any of those competitions before. And that was maybe the only reason that I was able to inch out of them. It certainly wasn't because I was naturally stronger than those guys. It was just that I had enough practice. And so when those guys get good, then they all beat me,
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know that because I figured if you're going to be in a competition like that, you just can't be like, like you're a basic, kind of stay up to date, 2 to 3 times a week, just keep myself in casual shape. Guys like that, they have to go at it hard. I mean, like I said, strength and technique definitely in competitions like that. It's just it's really really it's definitely a skill set that really that takes a lot to get to master. And
absolutely, and the Highland Games stuff is even more so in that particular realm. Those guys, some of that stuff is really. You got to really be technically sound. It's not necessarily who's the strongest guy or the guy that's in the best shape. It's the guy that has spent those hours working on, his footwork and all. It's very similar to wrestling. You know what I mean? You got guys that have spent hours and hours, practicing their lockups and their headlock takeovers and, tackle, drop down, get it again. Just do that stuff over and over and over and over and over until you're sick of doing it. But then one day you're pretty good, So it's the same thing.
Hey, Ruby, I'm getting word from production that we froze or something.
That we froze?
On some of the feeds.
Oh, we did? Huh. Okay. I'll check that out. But yeah,
and I try to have production see if they can reboot their system and everything in there to see if they'll change that too. So
yeah, and I'll see if I can do some checking out. Like I said, right now, we're simulcasting to our Facebook page and also to our YouTube channel as well at the same time. So if need be, I might have to maybe kind of bow out of the Facebook feed and with the comments. So, with not reading the comments, and I'll just have to free that up. Usually the Mac, well, I'll tell you what, the Mac has carried a lot better than the Windows system I had. I'm about ready to kick that thing to the curb. So Derek, want to move back here. We're going to move back to wrestling here. Definitely some great experiences, broadcasting, powerlifting. Obviously, a bit ambitious individual to kind of expand his horizons and more than just one talent in more than one field. But we're going to move back here to the world of wrestling here now.
Okay.
In regard, obviously, you're back. Of course, you're still wrestling these days. And in regards to athletes or new blood that are getting into the business, is there anything that you would change on how new wrestlers are being brought up into the business compared to how you were brought up into the industry, such as what skill set they're being trained on, or how long they should be in training? Whenever they're trying to get their feet wet and they're trying to get a successful start in the professional wrestling industry.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I can't speak for everywhere. I've been lucky enough to see a lot of places that are still training people kind of the same way that I was trained, or at least the same sort of blueprint of, look, you got to go in, you got to put in your time, and don't worry about doing everything complete, everything fancy and every move that you want to learn right away. Let's learn how to build that foundation. So I think that's a key for everything that you do. If you're a lifter, you're not going to go in and try to do your 1 rep max every time, because you're not going to get any stronger, right? So you just have to build your foundation. So I can't speak for everywhere, but I do know I've seen some places where I think guys don't have great footwork and they don't really understand the whole point of things. And that could just be the individual. Some people catch on to things very, very quickly. Some people it takes 2-3 years, and then all of a sudden one day the light bulb goes on and you just, oh my gosh, this guy is so much better than he was 2 months ago. How did that happen? Well, it's the amount of time that you put in. I would say this though. One thing that I think is a little different, when I started, and I would work some smaller shows, let's say, or even some of the bigger shows, I was lucky enough when I first started in Ohio, and then before I moved to Texas, and then before I moved to the Midwest, where I was like the opening match on cards that were stacked, like guys that were just fresh off of TV, so there were, and there were guys that were right on their way, and maybe they were going to be on TV and be making good money the very next week or next month or something like that. So everybody on the cards that I was on when I first started in a lot of places were very, very solid pros, and they were all making money. And they were ran by guys that had previously made money. And I'm not one that likes to use the word mark or any of that kind of stuff, but there are differences when you were working for a guy who has made his living at that business than somebody who had just been a fan and been a good promoter. I've worked for guys that didn't know anything about the wrestling business, but were great promoters. So they always drew good houses, and they were smart enough to hire somebody who knew the wrestling side of things. Those guys were always typically the most successful. But I've seen a little bit more of I don't want to say anybody can run a wrestling show these days, but there is a little bit of an element to that where maybe you don't realize that you're not doing things the way you should until you're 4, 5, 6 shows in, and then all of a sudden, well, why aren't we making any money, or why aren't these matches really what people are drawing or not drawing? And I think that there's a little bit of that, but I'm certainly not. There's a lot of positives about the wrestling business too, and I'm not one of those. Contrary to what you may hear, I'm not a bitter old man who thinks things used to be better. I don't. I just think things are a little bit different, and there's good and bad things about the past, and there's good and bad things about the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I mean, that's a good way to take it all in stride. I mean, um, as far as like even with the training that I've gotten, I was training 3 times a week for 4 months before I had my first regular match, and I was guided, the right way and the proper way. Um, and I think that really helps me as far as like the way that I mature in the business and how I should conduct myself, and definitely respect and definitely respect is a big factor that you still need to have in this business, and then also knowing when when your spot and when your time is due, when it comes up, and then also with the fundamentals, definitely, you train on your basics a lot. I mean, and that's what I did, and I mean, I felt like I didn't do too well. I mean, yeah, I would have liked to gone other places, but you know, I mean, I'm just happy with where I was, and hey, I
Well,
mean,
there's so many people that want to just train once or twice and try to get in the ring right away, and that's not the proper way that it's supposed to be done. If you don't know why you're getting to that point, you can't just do the moves and get to that point. You have to know the reasonings and everything like that. Nobody wants to take their time to learn. That's the biggest problem right now with a lot of the people coming up in the business right now, in my opinion.
yeah,
I think that there's definitely some truth to that. Although I wouldn't say that that's mutually exclusive to right now. I mean, I've been running into people like that for 27 years. I ran into that training guys at Harley's, the guys that just thought, oh well, I just need to be here once a week. Well, no, you don't. You need to really,
right,
don't play wrestler if you really want to do this. You really got to put something into it because it's hard enough. You know what I mean? It's hard enough to make it. And the thing that always struck me was that you could do literally. It's a business where you can do everything right. You never miss a workout. You're training all the time. You're nice to people. You have fresh gear. You look good. Your body's in great shape. You know what you're doing, and still it's a struggle, right? I mean, I think all of us could pick somebody that we know that have been like, oh man, why didn't that guy make it? Why, or that woman? Why didn't she make it? Well, sometimes that's just the way it is. I mean, and so to think that you can skate by and not do those things, and then it just makes your chances just that much worse,
yeah. Well, definitely, I think you and I can both agree on one thing is that, or all of us, I should say, there should be no, and there is no crash course professional wrestling match training. And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. No way.
yeah, and trust me, me and GQ have been around long enough to see it happen, and trust me, it's you'll see a natural disaster coming up about 1 hour into showtime. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I always think it's funny when not just a guy that has been around a long time is that you can just by having simple conversations with somebody, you can tell how long they've been in the business. Like there's the 2-year vet syndrome sometimes where it's like, just enough to know a few things, but you think you know everything. And then, you might talk to a guy who's been in 5 years and he's a little bit humbler and he's a little smarter, but he still might have, but at least he knows maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I don't have every experience that I could have. And then you meet somebody who's been in for 10 years and they seem a lot more grounded. And then you meet somebody who's been in for 20 and they don't know what the hell's going on anymore. You know what I mean? Everything has changed so much that it's just, it's a different business by that time, But I've seen that happen so much, and I can just hear somebody tell me their opinion about something. I say, oh yeah, so what have you been in about 3 years? And they're like, yeah, how'd you know? Well, just because I know, that's it.
yeah, well, yeah,
And I will say this at least. My coming into the business, I actually had chances to work with people like Derek and then Ace Steel and others. And I learned a lot of everything in between, not just the bump or how to do stuff and all that. I learned the business from them as well, and I do owe them a whole hell of a lot. With
Yeah.
Well, I'm
I'm
glad
still a mark. I'm still a mark. So nobody's going to deny that one way or the other. But still, I learned a lot from them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, and as far as like on the training aspect, and Sean once again stating that a lot of today's matches are all high spot finishers. Like I kind of compare people to who are ground wrestlers, and then others who bounce around a lot. I just like to call them spot monkeys, but that's just me personally. Because I guess maybe because I can't flip and bounce like anybody else, but I guess it's just my style, and that's the way I have. But I'm an advocate for old school, but that's just how I am. And I mean, you can mix a little more, more of the technique of maybe some high flying spots, but but to have something spot for spot, and you need to get the crowd emotionally involved or emotionally invested into your match, or else you're not going to have. You're going to have somebody sitting on their hands wanting to know when they can, or they're just going to go get their beer while this match is going on. That's kind of an insult to your work if you if you see that, and that's something
Sure.
and that's something that you don't want to do. But yeah, but I just hope. I mean, a lot of people. We need guys like Derek Stone. We need guys like Bob Orton. We need guys that really know, that are fundamentally sound, that have been there, been to the dance. And if somebody wants to get to that dance, they just need to shut up, mouth shut, ears and eyes open, and just learn. And that's all you need to do, and the rest will follow. So, I think
Absolutely.
I'm going to let GQ on this next question here.
Sure, man.
Well,
Absolutely.
Well, you worked a lot of places, and we're talking about like old school and then new school and everything like that. There was a group that started up in the St. Louis and the Kansas City area called NWL. It had major backing with it. They signed a bunch of people to actual contracts and everything. And it looked like it had promised to go far, and then all of a sudden, bam, like they're getting rid of St. Louis, and then everything just went like kind of to hell in the handbasket quick. You were one of the ones that were working backstage. What happened?
Well, okay, so it's not exactly an easy answer, and a lot of folks typically it's been a couple years now, and people say, well, if I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to bash on them. I'm not. It was an undertaking that was very, very difficult from the start. Major Bayston, who was the guy who had the money and had the vision for what he wanted to do, he had some very specific things. The only real knock that I could say about Major is the same knock that I have for a lot of folks, in that he's a smart guy, very talented guy, very smart and good at what he did. The problem with a lot of really smart people is they think they're the only smart person in the room, right? And that nobody else has anything of value. And I think that was a problem for him, is that he wasn't, he at times didn't listen to the pure wrestling people, I think, on a lot of things. And, again, just like I was talking about making it as a wrestling promotion is just not something that, and he wanted to do things his way, which is commendable. It's not an easy undertaking. It was very difficult. He had signed some folks to full-time contracts. He had a support staff. I was one of those folks that was signed to it was a good enough opportunity for me to leave the best job I ever had. So it was financially viable for me to do that, and it was something that I thought could work. There was a lot of, I think if you talk to anybody that was involved, St. Louis never took off. And I think it was because of the folks that were involved in the St. Louis area as far as promoting it there. They just didn't have I'm not knocking them. I'm saying that they didn't maybe have the right grasp on how it was supposed to go. A lot of the St. Louis guys never bought into the new character names, and they all went back to their old, their previously established names. I think that was maybe a mistake. It was just sort of, sometimes they were throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you know what that means. Like they're getting rid of things that maybe just needed tweaked, and they just got rid of, and then had to build up to having nothing. I mean, believe me, and it does sound like I'm bashing, and I'm really not. I mean, I didn't have the best experience there. But looking back on it 2 years later, it's or 3 years later now, I guess maybe, it was something that was going to be an uphill battle from the very start, and it was. So I think that, it was one of those things where just having money wasn't necessarily, the right thing. If they didn't have the amount of money that he had, it would have went away a lot sooner. So that sometimes I think having the amount of financial backing made things last a little bit longer. So maybe you didn't really notice that the problems were as big as they were until they were already pretty big, and a couple months in, people were already being let go. There's things that they thought were important. They ended up letting people go, letting people get fired. There were, I just think that truthfully, if the same situation came up today with the same group of folks, knowing what they maybe messed up earlier or maybe didn't have the right concept or, any of those things, I think they'd do a lot better. I don't know that it would ever be successful. I mean, you look at things and, you think of a great company like Ring of Honor, a lot of those guys that work for Ring of Honor, they still have other jobs. You know what I mean? They work part-times at gyms and they do not a lot of those guys are making tons of money. And like I said, that's not a knock. That's reality, So I just think that the biggest thing was that it was just hard. I think if you want to say one thing, I think they tried to run too many shows too quickly, or maybe it could have just been one show a month in St. Louis, one show in Kansas City instead of two in each venue when they never drew in St. Louis, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Do you think there was anything that could have been done maybe differently with the St. Louis market? Because I know there was a lot of better crowds in Kansas City, and they were trying to do the whole Kansas City versus St. Louis feud, which everybody's seen that so many times with either that or you got Chicago versus St. Louis feud that been going on for decades and everything. What could they have done differently in the St. Louis market at the time?
I don't know. I will say this, and I think that we were based in Kansas City, so there was more staff in Kansas City. I think that the type of wrestling that was being presented fit Kansas City a little bit more than St. Louis. I also think a lot of times, a lot of the guys that you saw on the St. Louis roster were guys that you've seen at every St. Louis show in the area already anyway. You know what I mean? So why would I pay $10 a ticket more to go see this guy that I just saw at South Broadway, or I just saw for this guy? Or, does that make sense? I think that there was a little bit of that. But hindsight's 2020. It could have. And I'll say this, that there was a bigger staff in Kansas City, so there were more people getting things done in Kansas City. It was where the base of operations were. It was where we had our first TV show, on air in the market there. So I think maybe a little bit more of more attention to the St. Louis market probably would have helped a little bit more.
Yeah.
Now, was there much competition out in Kansas City at all during that, or?
At that time, no, there really wasn't. There was maybe at the time that the NWO was going on. There was, there used to be Metro Pro, which a lot of those guys at Metro Pro, Chris Goff ran that show, and he ended up being the operations guy for NWO. So a lot of those guys came along with him. There was KCXW, who ran consistent shows, and they did very well, but they were only running once a month, so there really wasn't much competition as far as wrestling goes at all in Kansas City. Really, it was sort of that was the only game in town, I guess. So I think that helped. That also helped,
Because at least in the St. Louis area, there's probably a good 10 feds that were running almost every other week.
Absolutely,
one fed running and oversaturation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of those guys that were working for the NWL were also on those shows, right? So why
when they got signed, they got pulled off most of those shows. Nobody could see them anywhere else but for the NWL whenever everybody was still waiting for it. Because I know, Jake Durden, when he was signed, they were for a while. He couldn't do anything anymore. So
right. But it wasn't a completely horrible experience for me. I ran the training center there, and I really enjoyed it. And I got to meet some great students that are now like top-notch pros, guys like Camaro Jackson, Kenny Alfonso, Dr. Isom. Those guys all started with the NWL system, and that's where and those guys are all out working now and doing very, very well for themselves. So I mean, there were some positive things as well. I got a chance to be around guys like Dak Draper, who is a friend of mine now. Niles Planck, who's always been a friend of mine. Got a chance to really work with those guys, and it didn't work out, but it even under the best circumstances, it was going to be very difficult. And I was pretty happy that I got to be a part of it at least. It didn't end well for me, and it didn't end well for them. Obviously, but there were some positives as well. And I think some positives for at least the Kansas City wrestling area. It did kind of spark some interest in new shows. And now, if you look at the landscape there in Kansas City now, there are a couple new promotions that do okay. They could do better. Of course, everything's kind of shut down now, but as of 6 months ago, there was a sort of a revitalization of the area. So it worked out okay, I suppose, in the long run. Now, I'm not Major Baisden, and I didn't lose $4 million, so maybe my perspective is a little different.
Yeah, well, I mean, the guy did have money, but I mean, what can you say? You try to run two local promotions and you dropped $4 million. I mean, but I mean, gosh, I mean, the guy had production equipment. All. I mean, as far as I mean, I know with with the LED boards for the entrance, lights and everything else, the ballroom that they had here in St. Louis. I mean, the odd thing about that though is they were running shows it was like Wednesday night or Thursday night or something. It was like really
that was I would say, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but yeah, that was probably a bigger mistake. They really had they were looking for venues, and they were running on Thursday nights at the Casa Loma Ballroom, which I think is in an area that isn't the best part of town.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so I think that was an issue there too. They had a similar issue in Kansas City. We ran at the Shrine, gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It's a Shrine Memorial. When they first started running there, that is also not in the best part of town either, and it was a chore to get people to want to go to that part of town. I think that some of the things with the St. Louis market, rushed kind of, and the shotgun to try to get on anytime and every other week on a Thursday. Thursday nights just did horribly for them, and they never really got off the ground, and it was never got an opportunity to make it work. And the folks that were in charge of the St. Louis area really didn't know how to put in the right amount of effort. And I don't know. That's all speculation on my part. So I don't, but
yeah,
it was definitely difficult running on a Thursday night in an area where nobody really wanted to be anyway,
And it's kind of funny you say that, because even me living around the area, and I know how that area is, I'm like, why would I want to go down there on a Thursday night? Even if
right.
And I mean, I would even say it would be even tough to draw a crowd, even if you're like if you're in the most safest of venues, because that's, I mean, really, people don't think about going down and staying late on a show on a Thursday night. I mean, especially if you're doing that on a weekly or even a bi-weekly basis. I mean, that's like overkill, and that's I was kind of wondering even to myself after it started. I'm like, I wonder how long these guys are going to go, and I'm like, well, I won't have to wonder no longer. But
right,
yeah, I guess hopefully it's a live and learn experience for Major Baisden, and but great exposure for all the talent that's been in there though, and those that have who capitalized on that. So
yeah, I think there were some folks that definitely and this is just a part of what it's like to really take the bull by the horn sometimes. There were some guys that saw an opportunity and thought, man, I don't know how long this opportunity is going to last, but I'm going to do everything that I can. I'm going to go and be a part of every promotional thing that I can do. Anytime you want somebody to do a promo or an interview, yeah, I'll do it. You want me to go do something for a radio station, I'll do it. Those guys are the guys that really, and those were the same guys that were in the gym all the time, and they're always in training, and they were guys that were really pushing themselves. And it's, a couple of guys really were able to take advantage of that situation. Some guys just thought they made it and were lazy, and that didn't work out too well for those guys.
No, apparently not. Um, but as far as focusing back on you now,
Okay.
as far as with your long time being in the business, what moment would you consider to be most memorable to you in regards to the wrestling business? And it don't have to be like a match or
Knocking out Steve Murphy. Oh.
well,
okay, this will sound. Oh, there's a couple of them. So one of them was I was doing. I had taken kind of a break from doing a lot of television stuff for the WWF, and then I went back and like the end of 2000, like around 2000, 2001, I was kind of finishing up doing TV stuff for those guys, and I was really happy that there were some folks that were there when I would did things 3, 4, 5 years earlier that still remembered who I was. That made me feel good, having a conversation saying, with certain individuals saying, Derek, you've got the talent to be here full time. There's just things that you've got to, there's things maybe we've got to find for you, or maybe if things work out, just keep at it. I always like those things, as stupid as it sounds, Vince McMahon knowing me by name and saying, Derek, it's good to see you, was a big moment for me. Oh, wow. Okay. This guy actually does know that I'm a person. That was nice. A big thing was getting a chance to really work for Harley Race was great for me as well. And I'll tell you one real quick story. Okay. And this was back when I was still married, but my mother, I grew up in Denver, but most of my career I lived somewhere else. I haven't been at a home for a long time. But last time I was on WWF TV, I had a chance to work with Essa Rios. My mother got a chance to see that match at the Pepsi Center. So she had maybe only seen me ever wrestle maybe one other time before that. So it was kind of nice that the fact that my family, who never really got to see me wrestle except when I was on TV or something, got to see me in front of 25,000 people. So that's probably a pretty big moment. Seeing guys like Trevor Murdoch, who I had a big hand in training, seeing him do so well has been a big moment for me. Not because it's because I'm responsible, but because I know the kind of work that the guy put in, and to see him do very well gives me a lot of I feel really good about that. Seeing a lot of the students that I had go to Japan and be very successful, that's made me feel really good too. So there's a few of those things right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So, mentioning Trevor Murdoch and, you're mentioning Harley. And so now I got to pick up here now of you as the Sheik with the with the WLW title on here now. Yeah. So as far as like what you're currently doing now, from what I last heard, and I haven't followed much because I don't know how far back that WWL has gotten. So, are you currently are you still their world or their heavyweight champion down there?
I am. Yeah, I'm still the World League Wrestling heavyweight champion. I was part of their tag team champions as well. We lost those belts though not too long ago. But yeah, still working for them, and I'm real happy to be a part of WLW. They especially with Harley passing, to be able to still kind of have a voice there and kind of say, look, I know the way Harley wants to run things here, and if I could just be a support for that in the locker room, I'm real happy about that. That's been real great for me.
Oh yeah, I mean that's awesome, and well, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that this is your third reign as WLW champ.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I say, back around Kansas City with Metro Pro Wrestling, winning their championship twice. You were also in over the with Maryland Unified.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, being the MVWA heavyweight champion. I'll tell you what, though, man. You had a closer look at that heavyweight title than I did, but man, I just that was that was definitely a treasure to behold on that belt.
Yeah.
I had no idea I mean, was it like was it like a GQ's about ready to lose it over here? Sorry, but I tried looking at it so close. I'm like, it looks like a decorative dinner plate or something like that. It's like the whole
look a little
round
bit,
piece.
yeah, for sure.
Oh my god!
I know what it was made out of. That's why I'm laughing. You know, at like rental halls and everything, those ashtrays that they had with the sand in it.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
That dinner plate was what it was made out of.
Oh my lord! Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, Derek, that title was actually, I guess some other company bought it and spray painted the plates at 24 karat gold and named it the Missouri Eagles title. So, if it
Oh
makes
wow! I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all.
yeah,
Oh, I forgot about that one. Actually.
yeah. Oh no, trust me, I know about that. So I'm like, you. I was like that belt looks so familiar, but you had tried to disguise it. You know, it's like, oh, I knew what it was. So as we're coming around the end here. Like I said, I shared, the first opening experience with MVWA with you, and actually, I don't know if you. I mean, I know that I remember it was within my first year. I actually got out to Kansas thanks to you, and for Sunflower State's nightly studio show.
Oh,
One,
awesome!
yeah, I mean, I remember, you and Big Butch
Yeah.
Bronson, and trust me, I had a 3 minute match with Bronson, and I remember the swinging full Nelson and how tight it was getting as he kept swinging me around, and boy, I
That's a
was like,
big dude.
yeah,
That's a big guy for sure.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big dude. Do you have like any? Is there any like memorable road stories from the world of wrestling that you can share that either have either that are funny or something that stuck with you in another way?
Yeah. Okay. How appropriate or inappropriate can I be here?
Well,
I'm sitting back on this one.
well, I mean, it's after 9:30, but it's summer. But if it's kids, they can have earmuffs.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you this. This is a little. This just kind of. So I got to spend a great amount of time with Skandar Akbar. I had met him before when I lived in Texas, and he was very, very helpful to me and kind of took me under his wing. And then, of course, when I became the Sheik for Harley, and he was my manager, so I was around that guy all the time. And probably like the only time that I wasn't laughing when I was around him is when we were on camera and we were supposed to be these serious heels. But the guy just made me laugh constantly, And mostly it was because he was making fun of me, or he was making fun of people. And I'm, if you know me at all, I make fun of people that I care about. And so, if I'm on you and I'm kind of, breaking your balls a little bit, it's because I like you, So he's kind of like that as well. So he used to have this thing where he would constantly say, Derek, you're never going to be one of the boys. You're never, all this stuff. And he'd say it in a way that you knew he was joking with you. So he'd say, here's what you got to do. If you want to be one of the boys, you have to sleep with a 300-pound woman. She has to be at least 300 pounds or I'm never going to accept you. You're never going to. And of course, I want everybody to know that at the time I was married. So that was, he knew that I was married, it was a big joke and everything. So we would be walking and going to some show and he'd see a large woman and he would say, nope, she's not big enough for you. Nope, that doesn't count. She does, and I know that as inappropriate as it was, and he never said it to them, but it was always to me, and it was always a way of trying to, just kind of keep me under his thumb, but have a little fun with me, So that was always, that kind of stuff was really great. I also one time was coming back from a television taping, and I was a real young guy. It was just when I just moved to Texas, and we were driving from Louisiana back to Dallas. And Akbar was driving at about 120 miles an hour through, I believe we might have been in Jackson, Mississippi or somewhere. We were coming from somewhere along there. I can't really remember, but I know we were in Jackson. And so picture this, okay? It's like 3 a.m. He's driving like 120 miles an hour, no lie, through the city. Obviously gets pulled over by a cop. What does he do? What would most people do? They'd be like, oh, I guess we're getting a ticket, right? He stops the car, pulls over, gets out, starts walking towards the police car, and he's cutting a promo the whole time. And he's saying, I know we're going really fast, officer. We're just coming from this TV taping and blah blah. And he said, and he starts telling him. He said, and I was in the car, not to name drop, but I was with Killer Tim Brooks and with referee James Beard and with Sam Houston. And he Akbar starts telling this cop, and he's talking a million miles an hour, and I'm thinking he's going to get shot, he's going to get killed, and we're all going to go to jail. I mean, he was legit going 120 miles an hour through the city, And this cop and him start talking. Next thing I know, I see him signing an autograph for this cop. He tells the cop that the reason we had to get back is because I was married and my wife was pregnant. She wasn't. I don't have any children, but that we had to get back because she was giving birth in the morning. They induced her, and we had to get back. And so the cop comes up to me and he says, "Hey, congratulations." And I just went with it. I didn't know at the time that he told him that my wife was giving birth at that very minute. So that's just one of a million stories. But he was always a real character. I don't know why I've been thinking about him a lot lately. So I guess because we're just talking about WLW. That was always really fun. He was always just a real fun guy, and he'd snicker at me, and he was always laughing at me. But he was also the first guy to say if there was and usually I was always pretty well taken care of, and people really liked me, so I never really had any trouble. But if there was ever like a guy that tried to big league me or something like that, he was all over him in a second. And I miss the guy a lot.
Yeah, definitely a great talent. And, I hear Skandar Akbar, and I'm thinking of and all I can think of is childhood to tuning in on Sunday mornings with World Class, with Devastation Incorporated and Battling
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah, I'm a member of Devastation Incorporated. Once a member, always a member, is what he'd say. So yeah, I guess I still am.
Yeah, awesome. Well, man, we went through a lot here, and what I wanted to, coming back here, I know we talked lightly at the beginning of this with the whole COVID situation here.
Yeah.
Do you have like any other like upcoming events that you've heard of that maybe you might be able to be part of shortly, or?
Yeah, so the only thing that I really have on the books is WLW is going to be back, and they're going to be running their television tapings in Troy, Missouri. So I'll be there July 11th. That's the only thing that I really know right now, that I know I'll be there. So hopefully if everybody's listening to this and they want to come on out to a good, solid wrestling show. And if you haven't been to a WLW show at the Harley Race Arena, you should go. It's a lot of fun. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on those shows. They're really fun shows, and it's a great arena, and it's kind of like a little mini wrestling museum as well. If you haven't been there, you get to see a lot of great photos, and so that's really about all that I have coming up.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, yeah, because I wanted to see if you were going to mention that, because I heard speculation of possibly WLW coming back, and so now GQ, we basically heard it.
Yeah, I probably said something I shouldn't have said just now, but cat's out of the bag, so we'll be there on the 11th. So hopefully we'll see some folks there.
Yeah, as long as any promotion doesn't try to run in St. Louis County, because health department will come and shut you down, or some other goons will come shut you down, and obviously this is out in Lincoln County, so
Lincoln County, yeah, we're in Lincoln County, so
yeah. So it's definitely another monster to deal with here, and probably something I sit here, there's hardly anything we can do here in St. Louis County other than the executives that have got their butts so tight they're whistling Dixie, and I know that's probably a controversial phrase to say right now, but anyway, but I'm not a chick, so I can say it. So I'm just saying. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Derek. I mean, it's actually been, on the guy that on his birthday, I'm not going to say how old you are. You can if you want, but
48. I'm all right with it. I'm 48 years old.
All right. 48 years old, still going strong, and current and 3-time WLW heavyweight champion, holding multiple championships, getting his very first match in the World Wrestling Federation ever. So, I don't know if anybody could really top that at all, but that's awesome. And definitely a great reflection of a career. And, it's just really awesome to have you on here, man. And I'm glad that you did it. And I'm glad that you spent at least the night of your birthday with us and just giving us some great stories, some great insight, and definitely appreciate you. And I'm sure GQ feels the same as well.
Oh, I agree.
Guys, thanks so much for having me on. I had a blast. It was great. Anytime you want to kind of just shoot the bull, let me know. I had a great time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll see if I can maybe if July 11th. I mean, I'm going to see if I can play a little hooky. Work may not like
That'd be
me,
great.
but yeah, if I can play a little hooky, at least come out to Troy, at least maybe catch up or something. I mean, that'd be great if we can find a way to do that. So
I'd love to, man. Hopefully you can make that happen. That would be great. I'd appreciate it.
all right, brother. Derek, you have a good night, brother. I appreciate it, man.
You too, guys. Thanks so much, and keep doing what you're doing. You got a great show. Okay.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Talk to you soon.
See
Bye-bye.
you, man. All right, man. So that was Derek Stone. Man, I'll tell you what an awesome interview, man. Just a class guy in and out. Sean Stolze said it earlier. I mean, I agree 150% with Derek, man. But hey, GQ, you got some really great insight now about what going on with the NWL and what what mistakes they basically did, and yeah, we basically heard from the inside, and well, yeah, I guess now you know, man.
And knowing is half the battle.
Yeah, knowing is half the battle. I'll tell you what, we're going to, I don't know if, well, I mean, no one's really been calling our lines here, but of course I didn't really display. But definitely great to talk to Derek Stone here, and yeah, definitely. We're definitely gonna be looking forward to next week, man, because that is gonna be one. That's gonna be one fun show because I've had
a bloody show is what it's going to be.
Well, I mean, yeah, it may be, but next week is gonna be it's gonna be fun, and like I said, we've actually got 2 more weeks after that, and we also may have a special Sunday edition toward the end. The reason why I say that is, GQ, guess what? Homeboy here is going to be taking a nice little vacay and getting out of this freaking county, and I'm going to go relax in the countryside for about a week, and I can't wait for it. So, but yeah, but we'll let you know here. We're going to, but here's what we got for you next week, though. Next week is Attila Khan next Thursday night. Of course, we'll start the show at 8 p.m. Central. Probably Attila will be coming on here roughly around 8:30, just like Derek did this week. And we're definitely going to be talking around the the inside of Attila's career, and also we're going to talk about the many other faces before Attila, and also some other projects that this man has done throughout his career, and of course, having some in-ring experiences with him as well, and we'll definitely be focusing on that as well. So it's definitely gonna be a fun show next week with Attila Khan, and definitely you want to tune in for that. And I think that's pretty much. I think that's about all we got here. GQ, do you got any closing words, any final thoughts before we get on out of here? Nope. You're ready to go, man. I don't blame you. Yep. But hey, we thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. It was awesome seeing you all here. Just remember, we will have a guest for July 9th and a guest for July 16th. Now, I may spill the beans definitely for next week for July 9th, but July 16th, I'll definitely be spilling some beans for you next week, but you'll have to tune to the end of the show. I was a little nice this week, but I want to let you know what was going on. But as we get this wrapped up, I want to thank everybody once again for tuning in. For Mr. GQ Matthew Wayne Schuyler III, my name is Rough Cut Rick Ruby. We are your co-hosts for False Count Everywhere Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight, guys. You have a good rest of your night, and have a great weekend. we'll catch you on the flip side next Thursday.